In this episode, we're putting the spotlight on the budget reconciliation bill that's currently moving through Congress. Maybe you've heard of it, the big, beautiful bill. That's what they're calling it. But let me tell you something. There's nothing beautiful about a bill that cuts your benefits, jacks up your rent, and let billionaires off the hook. This isn't legislation. It's a straight up stick up of the American people. In the United States of America, in the so-called richest country in the history of civilization, poverty is growing, wages are shrinking, housing is unaffordable, groceries are out of reach, and the people in power are quickly trying to push through this big, beautiful bill. Let me say this clearly. There is nothing beautiful about a bill that takes from the poor and gives to the rich. There is nothing beautiful about gutting programs people rely on just to survive. And there is absolutely nothing beautiful about a government that tells struggling families to tighten their belts while it fattens Wall Street's bottom line. This bill is not reform. This bill is not relief. This bill is bullshit. I'm Hendrell, and this is Politics Unfiltered. Welcome back to another unfiltered episode. If you haven't already, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this podcast so that it continues to grow and continue to reach as many people as possible. Now, let's jump into the big, beautiful bill. I know you're waiting to hear all about it. I know that many of you are probably asking the same question I was asking when I first saw it. What exactly is in this bill? Well, the bill was actually passed in June by a Republican-controlled Congress. And it was fully endorsed by President Trump, still is fully endorsed by President Trump. And right now it's currently sitting in the Senate where they're negotiating on changes or reconciling it to pass it through Congress altogether. They could make it better or they could make it worse. Right now it's being called the biggest economic legislation since 2017, since Trump passed the tax cuts in 2017. The talking points on the Republican side from the conservative heads who pushed this bill, the talking points say it's about fiscal discipline, personal responsibility, and economic growth. All the typical conservative or fiscal conservative talking points. But here's the truth. Yeah, the bill offers no tax on tips or overtime or Social Security benefits. Yeah, and that's great. But there's a catch. If you read the fine print, these tax benefits are only temporary, while at the same time, they're giving the rich and wealthy permanent tax cuts. Again, those tax breaks are only temporary for working folks and poor people. But all of the tax cuts in this bill, or most of all the tax cuts in this bill for the rich and wealthy are permanent. It's a hoodwink. It's a bamboozlement. They're doing what they can to make sure that the 1% is taken care of, while trying to make you think that you're going to get something that's long-term out of this as well. The big, beautiful bill, it eliminates expanded Medicaid eligibility for Obamacare. It slashes SNAP food stamp benefits by $30 billion. It caps federal rental assistance at the 2024 levels. It extends the Trump-era tax cuts for corporations. It does away with the child tax credit that got kids out of poverty. It ends federal student loan forgiveness initiatives. And it increases defense spending by, I think, $80 billion. Let me walk you, I know that's a lot. Let me walk you through just a few specifics of those points. Take Medicaid, for instance. The big, beautiful bill eliminates what they call the enhanced federal match provided under the ACA or Obamacare, whichever one you call it, which is the Medicaid expansion program. That means that more than 10 million low-income Americans, mostly in red states, mostly in rural communities, mostly in metro areas, are now at risk of losing health coverage altogether. It also adds a number of barriers and hoops that people will have to jump through just to stay enrolled, requiring what they call frequent re-verification and income checks. and creating a national employment tracking system to monitor whether or not you're working. They're going to monitor whether or not you're working nationwide. Folks, this is not just red tape. This is red ink on the health records of poor people. It turns, on the other side, it turns the food stamp program, SNAP program, into a real life hunger game. The bill adds stricter work requirements for any adult without a disability or without a dependent under the age of 6. It adds strict work requirements that includes people working less than 35 hours a week, which is most people who work part-time and do gig work. Most students, most retired folks. But let's be real. The average fast food worker in this country works between 28 and 32 hours a week. The average warehouse associate, part-time warehouse associate, works about the same time. The average retired store greeter who we see at the front of those stores, they work about the same time frame, same story. And those jobs, they don't offer paid leave, they don't offer guaranteed hours, and they definitely do not offer affordable child care. So under this new law, if you're a mom working 2 part-time jobs at 34 and totaling 34 hours a week, you lose food assistance. Let me take a step back. Let me put that in a clear format or clear terms. A single mom or dad or grandparent working less than 35 hours a week as a part-time worker will now lose access to food stamps. And it's simply because they don't meet the new 35-hour threshold that the big, beautiful bill put in place. That even impacts students who receive food stamps. We know that those jobs aren't going to offer more hours to help them make ends meet because then they would be full-time employees and they would be eligible for full-time benefits. And these big corporations are just not going to go for it. Folks, under the big, beautiful bill, those people are suddenly going to be told by the very government that they're looking for assistance from, they're going to be told that they're not working hard enough. In America, where people are already working too much, they're going to be told that they're not working hard enough. That's not reform. That's punishment disguised as policy. Punishment disguised as policy. That's what it is. And then there's housing. Everybody's talking about the skyrocketing costs of rent all across the country. Since the pandemic, rents in this country have increased by about 21% since 2021. Yet, the big, beautiful bill caps housing vouchers at 2024 levels. Think about that. It's 2025. Next year will be 2026. And they're going to cap the housing voucher levels at 2024 levels, effectively cutting support when you calculate in inflation that we have seen steadily tick up. And then you talk about the wait list for Section 8. The wait list for Section 8 in this country, in some cities, is over 10 years long. Think about that. 10 years long waiting for a Section 8 voucher. Meanwhile, you have these large real estate investment firms or these large hedge funds like BlackRock and Invitation Homes. They're buying up entire neighborhoods in some cities, and they're jacking rents up by double digits. This bill, it does not stop that. It doesn't regulate it. It actually rewards it. It offers tax write-offs for housing, what they call housing innovation, which in plain English means turning housing into a playground for hedge funds. Instead of offering more subsidies for those companies that are committed to affordable housing, they would prefer to give tax write-offs to hedge funds who are going to jack the cost of rent up on people who are already struggling to pay rent. This bill even impacts education. Under the big, beautiful bill, federal funding for public schools is frozen for 5 years. No increases. 5 years is frozen. Despite rising teacher shortage, despite the rising student needs, it's frozen. Sub-zero. Frozen. It also impacts student loans. It repeals the public service loan forgiveness program and eliminates what they call income-driven repayment plans or repayment reforms for student loans. Just in this, and put this into context, because this is happening just months after millions of Americans are feeling a gut punch from having student loans impact, in some instances, their credit scores by hundreds of points. This is when most people are just starting back paying student loans after they've been on pause for a number of years. This is what the government says: we're not going to offer you any repayment options. No income-driven repayment options. You've got to pay what we said as the repayment plan. That's insane to me. You cannot make this stuff up. In a time when we need more nurses, more teachers, more public servants, this bill tells them their service isn't worth supporting. The American government turns its back on them. That's what it seems like to me. I don't know if you're listening to this podcast, I don't know what it seems like to you, but that's what it seems like to me. But you have companies like Facebook that are going to get $15 billion tax cut under this big, beautiful bill. They're looking out for them. They're making sure the wealthiest folks and the wealthiest companies get their breaks. Folks, it's clear who the winners are in the big, beautiful bill. Corporations and the wealthiest Americans, point blank, period. They get to take advantage of corporate tax cuts that are being extended through 2035. And that in itself will cost all of us, you, me, if you're listening to this podcast, it's going to cost you, me, and everybody else in this country about $650 billion. $650 billion that is going to cost us. Capital gains tax. They're going to get a capital gains tax breaks. Or let me rephrase this. The capital gains tax breaks are going to be made permanent for the wealthiest folks in this country. That's going to cost all of us another $170 billion. They also raised the estate tax thresholds for these folks, which means that families worth $50 million or more will pass their wealth on to future generations in their family, tax-free, without being taxed a single dime on it. But it's only for folks who are worth at least $50 million. And then there's the big oil tax credits, which are being expanded by $50 billion, while clean energy incentives are snipped away and rolled back. So if you're ExxonMobil, this bill's a jackpot. If you're a struggling American, you're on your own. And they'll try the same old tricks. They'll say, but we need to fix the deficit. Let me break this down. 60% of this bill's deficit reduction comes from cutting services to the poor. 60%. They'll say, when you hear them say we need to fix the deficit, know that in the big, beautiful bill, 60% of this bill's deficit reduction comes from cutting services to the poor. 35% comes from freezing investment in public services like education and infrastructure. And the rest, it gets saved by taking from student borrowers, from renters, and from food assistance programs. Meanwhile, the top 1% in this country still gets richer. This isn't fiscal responsibility. This isn't about the deficit. It's physical punishment for being poor, for being working class, for not being connected. This bill is not just a policy failure. It's a statement of values. It tells the American people, if you're poor, it's your fault. If you need help, you're a burden. If you're not rich, powerful, or profitable, you're expendable. And yet this bill passed because a coalition of corporate lobbyists, conservative ideologues, and spineless centrists who refuse to stand up for working people. Democrats in the minority, to their credit, they did try to fight back, but the votes just weren't there. That's a fact. They don't have the votes. They couldn't stop it. And too many people in the media treated it like politics as usual. They're still not taking it serious. But this isn't usual, folks. This is deliberate cruelty. They're calling it the big, beautiful bill because they're hoping you won't read it. They're hoping you'll just hear the branding, hear the name, and move on. So if you're a single mom working 30 hours a week and raising kids, tough luck. If you're an Uber driver, a warehouse worker, or a janitor, or even a barista, trying to make ends meet, people who are struggling in this country, you don't have consistent work hours. You don't have benefits. They're essentially saying to you, too bad. You don't count. This bill's not for you. But let me ask you something. Since when is it patriotic to take food out of a child's mouth? Since when is it freedom to force people to work full-time just to qualify for a sandwich? Since when is it leadership to give billionaires a break while regular people break their backs? And the people writing the bills, many of these folks, they've never stood in a food pantry line. They've never had to decide between insulin and rent. They've never missed a utility payment and came home to the lights being shut off. But they've got no problem, none at all, making those of you who are listening to this podcast and those of you all across this country, they have no problem making those choices for you, because this isn't about the deficit. It's not about responsibility. It's about control. It's about keeping poor and working people too tired, too hungry, and too busy to fight back. And make no mistake, this bill didn't come out of nowhere. This is what happens when lobbyists write the laws, when billionaires fund the campaigns, and when everyday people are locked out of the rooms where the decisions get made. I want to switch gears for a moment. For just a moment, I'm going to switch gears from policy to morality, because this bill isn't just bad economics. It's a moral failure. When you cut food to families while giving tax breaks to billionaires, that's a moral choice. When you block housing aid while subsidizing luxury developments, that's a moral choice. When you remove health care from millions while increasing defense spending, that's a moral choice. And those choices were made on purpose. Let's stop pretending this is a big, beautiful accident. It's like the politicians in this country are okay with making working people beg for the scraps of a feast they prepared but weren't invited to. So what's the solution? What's the solution? Because this podcast isn't just about pointing the finger or pointing out where the fire is. We're here to show people how to help put the fire out. A real economic bill in this country, a real economic justice bill, a real big, beautiful bill would guarantee universal health care in America and ensure Medicaid expansion nationwide. It would raise the federal minimum wage and tie it to inflation. A real big, beautiful bill would expand the child tax credit and make it permanent so that we are ensuring that we're cutting child poverty in half in this country. It would cap rent increases, fund affordable housing, and cancel housing voucher wait lists. A real big, beautiful bill would cancel student debt, invest in public education, and rebuild the middle class, and it would surely tax the top 1% fairly and eliminate corporate loopholes that drain our economy. That would be a big, beautiful bill. Folks, that would be a great bill. It would be a huge, beautiful bill. So let me close with this. We don't need another press conference or press release from another politician. We don't need another empty slogan. We need action, because real people are suffering. And this bill makes it even worse. If they pass this bill, if this bill becomes a law of the land, it will make it worse for folks in this country. This economy doesn't need to be explained to death. It needs to be repaired, reimagined, rebuilt from the bottom up, not the top down. Listen, if you've ever struggled to pay a bill, you know this fight is personal. If you've ever had to choose between rent and groceries, you know this fight is personal. If you've ever looked at your paycheck and wondered How is this even legal? Then you know this fight is personal. This is your country too, not just the billionaires and big corporations. Your voice matters. And the people pushing this big, beautiful bill, the lobbyists, the billionaires, the politicians smiling on TV, they work for you, not the other way around. We see the game. Let's call it out. We see the game. Let's call it out. Let's hold these people accountable. Because this fight, it's not about left or right. It's not about red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican. It's about right and wrong. And I know which side I'm on. I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit me up on social media at Hendrell Remus, and let's keep this conversation unfiltered. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and definitely share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, truth matters, people matter, and silence is never neutral. Until next time, stay informed, stay critical, and never stop asking the hard questions. This is Politics Unfiltered, and I'm out.